When people find out I'm a private investigator, they often make fun of me. Oh, can I see your gun? You want a stakeout? You ever shoot anyone? See, my gun is a computer. I'm a digital forensics expert who spends his days digging up and decoding financial records. I know what the snarky attorneys here at the firm call me. Nerdoc Holmes. Double O Dwee. I work for a group of Southern California divorce lawyers, and it's my job to figure out where rich guy has hidden his wealth from trophy wife. Or I help rich guy hide his wealth from trophy wife. Either way, it's all cyber stakeouts, phony trusts, offshore accounts, shell corporations. Every once in a while I'll get called in to find trophy wife's deleted texts or rich guy's naked selfies. But usually by the time a divorce gets to my desk, no one cares about that stuff. It's all about the money. It's not a sexy job, is what I'm saying. At least until she came in. It was after 6 on a Friday. Everyone was gone for the day. I had come back to the office to get my Dungeons & Dragons character sheet. Single knuckle rapped on my door. A tall, elegant woman stood in the doorway, grey-haired, model thin, wearing a simple white dress, crop jacket, sunglasses. She was older than me, in her 60s, and yet still this was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. She sat down, just in awe. Yes, I know who you are, I said. I was a film buff, and I recognized her right off, even though she hadn't acted in anything in 40 years. She'd come up as a teenager on the New York stage, a student of Uta Hagen's, and for a brief moment was a favorite of 1970s auteurs like Kubrick and Altman. She performed alongside Brando and the young Pacino, great actors of her generation. Then, in her late 20s, she simply quit. Pulled a Grace Kelly, left to marry a wealthy older gentleman whose name you'd only recognize if you were familiar with the top donor line of LA museums. I'll call her Mrs. M. Mrs. M had gotten my name from a friend, a woman whose husband we represented in a contentious 3-comma divorce. 3 commas, because that's what it took to write $1 billion. It was a difficult case, I said. Mrs. M pointed to my desktop computer. She told me you used that thing to rob her blind. If $200 million is your idea of being robbed blind, she shrugged one shoulder. You were doing your job, she said. It's why I'm here. Divorce? She shook her head. My husband died 6 years ago. Oh, I'm sorry. She shrugged with the other shoulder. Thank you. It was a good marriage, she said, a week shy of 35 years. 2 children, 3 grandchildren, 4th on the way. Happy ending, I said. And yet, you're here. She looked around, chewed her lip. This is confidential. Always. She reached into her purse, handed me a single folded page, a printout of an email from one Argyle Warfus. Every other letter in his fake name capitalized like a ransom note. I am aware, the email began, that Actress 1953 is your password. I require 100% your attention. I have installed malware upon your computer, and remote desktop protocol give me access to your Facebook videos and photographs, and also email list. I have used these to create a deep fake video, very believable, portraying you in sex acts, and will send this pornographic to all your contacts, unless you send $800 Bitcoin. It went on like this, in that tortured Spanglish that must be taught by a malfunctioning robot somewhere. She nodded at the letter. I sensed her shame, fear. Can you find him? I smiled. There is no him. You understand that, right? My daughter says they can do things like this now. Put famous faces in porno movies. It was sad. Not just that she'd fallen for this, but that she thought she was still famous. That someone would go to the trouble of making fake porn with an actress who hadn't been in a movie in 40 years. Yeah, they can do that, I said. Deep fakes. But that's not what this is. This is just a scam. She pointed at the page. But that really is my password. Of course it was. Actress and birth year. Look, hackers buy passwords, I said. It doesn't mean anything. They can't get into your accounts. It's just spam. A phishing scheme. She cocked her head. You don't spend much time online, do you, Mrs. M? Arthur hated computers, she said. After he died, my daughter set me up with email, Facebook, Instagram. A wistfulness crossed her face. Sometimes I feel like I wasn't made for this time. The world makes no sense to me. I could see that. She was from a more glamorous era, more mysterious. It ended in her business when studios began chasing blockbusters, sharks, space aliens, superheroes. The end of a certain kind of film acting. Look, this is no big deal. I waved the email. Spam is just computer junk mail. Phishing schemes to get passwords and credit card numbers. They can't really put your face on porn. As long as you didn't answer the email, you have nothing to worry about. She pursed her lips. You answered the email. Another shrug. Well, tell me you didn't send Bitcoin. Of course not. I don't even know what that is. Her face reddened. Look, I don't need a computer lesson. I just want you to find him. She reached into her purse and emerged with her checkbook. Please. I didn't want her money. But I said yes. I figured I'd let a little time pass and then tell her what I already knew, that there was no Argyle Orphus, that the email came from some hacking farm in Malaysia, Estonia. I'd pick a ring that had been broken up by Interpol and say, see, no need to worry. In the meantime, I get to see her and play movie detective once more. I'd give her a report about phishing schemes, set her at ease, and then she'd pull out that checkbook again and I'd reach over, put my hand on those long, delicate fingers and say, no charge, doll. She'd squeeze my hand, just doing my job. I'd say, I skipped D&D that night to look up her movies online. Her entire career consisted of just 9 films, released between 1974 and 1980. 3 of the parts so small, there's nothing much to see. In one, she's the young widow Steve McQueen questions in a murder case. In another, the girlfriend of Elliot Gould's innocent brother, until Gould recognizes her as a dancer from a seedy club. Gould, you really like my brother? Mrs. M. I'd hoped to. In these small parts, she radiates something rare. You watch to figure it out, but it's never quite the same. It doesn't feel like technique. It seems natural, reflexive, real. A pained look, a twitch around the mouth, a glance away, and you think, she really felt that. By her last 4 films, she graduated to the female lead, playing against the great actors of her time. And you see why these auteurs fell for her. She's beautiful, yes, but beauty is common in film. It's more like she's an open nerve, not portraying emotion, feeling it. James Caan is getting dressed above her. She says dreamily from bed, I love you, with a slight quaver. Then we cut to an exterior shot of Caan getting on his horse while she watches from the porch. The scene is filmed over her shoulder from behind, with her holding the hitching post he's just untied his horse from, so that her arm frames the long shot as he rides away. A lesser actor would remove her hand from the post, cover her face, pretend in tears, or drop her head. Look, sadness. Mrs. M does neither. Her hand grips the post even tighter, for support, and a shiver goes through that arm to the goosebumps rising on her neck, a shudder as the wind blows a strand of hair, and you wonder, how did she do that? Convey utter heartache without ever facing the camera. The more I watched, the more I wished I could actually help her, defend her honor, drag this Argyle Orpheus to her house and beat him with the butt of a pistol until he apologized for scaring her. I bought some weed from my neighbor and ordered 2 pizzas and spent the weekend watching and re-watching her movies until I found myself feverish, fantasizing about our next meeting. I'd pull up to her white mansion in Beverly Hills, climb out of my sports car, which I buy between now and then. She'd be her young self, and I'd be a real detective, laconic, tall, without these glasses. I found Orpheus, I'd say, then I'd light a smoke. He's dead. But I didn't. It was him or me, Mrs. M. It sure as hell wasn't going to be me. Mr. or Justin. Okay, Justin. Then I'd step on my cigarette and take her in my arms. I knew I was being delusional. I knew she was a rich widow, 30 years older than me. But this was something I'd never felt with someone my own age. Maybe we were the same, Mrs. M and me. Maybe neither of us belonged in this world. I was still stoned when I woke up Monday morning on the couch, surrounded by pizza boxes, her last film frozen on the screen where I paused it. Mrs. M didn't want to meet at her mansion in the hills. My daughter is home this week. She can't know about any of this. No one can. So much for my stoned fantasies. Well, at least I didn't have to find a 1968 Spitfire before Friday. She wanted to meet at the Starbucks on Montana and 15th in Santa Monica, near her Pilates studio. She was there when I arrived, in yoga pants and a long-sleeve workout shirt. I couldn't reconcile it. This glamorous genius wearing the banal uniform of every woman west of the 405. She was sipping some kind of blended green herbal drink. Good thing I hadn't taken up smoking. I got coffee and sat across from her. I handed her a file. I'd found the perfect ring to blame the phishing emails on. A hacker group busted in Helsinki. Distant, dripping with Cold War intrigue, but not too scary. The actual ring was involved in stealing shopping points from people's accounts, but it had a Bitcoin scam going too. I knew she'd buy it. Like I thought, I said, there was no Argyle Orpheus. It was 3 losers in a basement in Finland. Hacked a department store for emails and passwords. Maybe you filled out a card at Barney's. Yeah, Barney's closed its Beverly Hills store. Well, then it was some other Rodeo Drive store, I said. The point is, you were just one of a million random phishing emails they sent out. As she turned the pages, sorrow passed over her face. I thought about her films, the rawness of her emotion, so open and guileless. It must have been what her husband saw too, a vulnerability that made her beauty almost unbearable. Empathy, so powerful it reflected back on you until you wanted to create for her a world that deserved such a person, to protect her and comfort her and, yeah, do other things. I thought, it hurts to look at you. Cheer up, I said. This is good news. But I sent Argyle Orpheus a reply. She said, well, the hackers destroyed their emails and contacts, I lied, to get rid of evidence before they were raided. Don't worry, your email will never surface. You're safe. I stared at her hand on the little table between us. This would be the time. Reach out. Touch her. Instead, I just said, it's over, Mrs. M. There's nothing to worry about. You don't get it. She began to cry. Then, just like in the movies, Mrs. M told me everything. She loved being an actress, especially early on. In some ways, she liked the smaller parts best. You're making something out of nothing, she said. A gesture, a look, it's all being present and aware. But once she started getting leads, she became disheartened. No matter how many lines she had, she couldn't seem to go beyond a few gestures and movements. These began to feel like tricks, and she felt herself stagnating. Then, she realized the problem. These were films written by men, directed by men, starring men, about men solving crimes, reconciling with fathers, coming back from Vietnam. And as brilliant as her directors and co-stars were, and they were, these weren't her stories. It wasn't her journey. She was the wife, the girlfriend, the love interest, the same in the beginning of the film as in the end. Those words, love, interest, began to feel like shackles, she said. I was just another thing for the hero to conquer, stakes to overcome, a motivation, a reflection of his desire. I pictured James Caan riding off into the sunset. A frame, I said. I may as well have been a dress and a pair of shoes sent over from wardrobe. Then, in 1979, she met Arthur at a party and she fell in love. I mean, what could I do? All I ever got to play was in love. And now the real thing was in front of me. How could I go on pretending? So she walked away, fired her agent, got married, had children, never went on another audition. I told Arthur that I never regretted my decision, and I didn't. But did I sometimes wonder? Yes. After Arthur died, she saw her life as two diverging paths, the one she'd taken and the one she hadn't. It wasn't as if acting ended in 1979. What if she'd gone on to become Meryl Streep or Emma Thompson? That's where Argyle Wolfers came in. If he could use a computer to put her face on a porn actress screwing a mailman, surely he could use that technology to simulate a little bit of what might have been. Of course. How had I missed it? She'd written back to Wolfers and offered him $5,000 to put her face in a movie she hadn't made. Can I ask, what movie? No, she said. That part's private. I work for you, I said. Look, she sighed. I made the right choice. I know that. I don't question it for a moment. I love my life, my kids, my grandkids. She leaned forward. But can't you sometimes wonder about the wrong choice, too? She sat back in her chair, took a deep breath. Splash. I stared. The mermaid. Yes. It was the last Hollywood call she ever got in the early 80s. A producer checking to see if she had any interest, right before they cast Daryl Hannah to play against a young Tom Hanks. I said no. Mrs. M laughed bitterly. Oh, that's okay, the producer had said. You're probably too old anyway. I left the Starbucks with that feeling I'd had earlier, the desire to make a world worthy of her. 2 weeks later, I called and set up another meeting. Mrs. M's daughter was back in Europe, so I drove to her house, which turned out not to be a mansion in the hills. She'd sold that house after Arthur died, put money aside for her kids, and donated the rest to charity. She lived now in a simple townhouse, a few blocks from the Santa Monica Starbucks. I rang the bell. She answered, dressed for Pilates again. She made coffee, even though she didn't drink it herself. I told her how I'd called some old college friends, a film editor, a CG tech, a colorist, how I'd provided them with photos and videos from her acting career and from the home movies she'd sent me. I told her deepfake technology was still pretty rough for doing a whole movie like Splash. The blinking, lip syncing, and skin tones would be distracting. But there were some things we could do. It's no work of genius. I opened my laptop. Ready? She covered a smile with that long, elegant hand. I'm not sure. On the screen was the movie poster of Splash. Tom Hanks, Daryl Hannah with a fishtail. But now the mermaid had Mrs. N's face. She burst into laughter. Oh my, she said. She leaned forward and studied the screen closely. Oh my, she said again. For the next 2 hours, we watched highlights of a 40-year career she never got to have. Movie posters, trailers, scenes, outtakes, even part of an interview on Inside the Actor's Studio. Any place we could get something to match the material we had for her. Parts in memorable films from 1980 to 2020. On the couch next to me, she laughed, gasped, curled her legs under her like a kid. She had me stop and go back. She slapped my arm. No! She was a lawyer, a queen, an environmental activist. She killed aliens and investigated murders and taught at Hogwarts. She won 6 Academy Awards and her movies made billions. And not once was she in a scene as a wife or a girlfriend. These were her stories. When it was over, she was weeping. From joy or wistfulness, I don't know. I suspected it was all the same. I told her I could email her the file. Oh God, no, she said. Destroy it, please. She said she'd seen it, and that was enough. I think, in the end, this was her true gift. The rare ability to see through fantasy. And now that she'd had one more little glimpse, she was ready to go back to the real. At the door, she took my hand. Thank you, Mr. Orr. I looked down at our hands. Justin, I said. Justin, she said. Thank you. I started to walk away, but then I turned back. Look, I'm sorry about Borfus, but it was either him or me. Sure as hell wasn't going to be me. She smiled. You did what you had to do. Thanks, doll. I winked and ground out a fake cigarette with my foot. And then I climbed into my Honda Accord.